Hello, as you know, my name is John Kula, and this is my discipline review. For my first discipline, I will be talking about the improvements I made over the course of the project in terms of texturing. Before starting this project, I had a good amount of experience in texturing. While most of it has been involved with cell shading, I have had some experience with semi-realistic textures and have created a few normal and specular maps. All of those textures were created by using Photoshop as well as Maya or Max. As I said in the last slide, a good amount of my experience of texturing was involved with cell shading, which wasn't used in this project. Although I've had experience with semi-realistic textures in some of the previous quarters, I haven't applied too many of them in an actual game. For this project, I needed to learn how to be more efficient with semi-realistic textures. Knowing that I learn best from completing something and then looking back at the steps in more detail, I completed tutorials and then reviewed the steps. As I read each step, I made sure I understood what the reason was for that particular step instead of it being done any other way. Just like with many design concepts, you need to know what your end result is going to look like, or at least have an idea of what it will look like. As I looked at tutorials, I kept in mind how similar they would be in my game. Even if the tutorials weren't for models in my game, some of the steps were able to be applied to my texturing process for other materials. Here's an example of a tutorial I found online. The end result was a realistic wood texture. As I completed the steps, I kept in mind why each step was important to the overall texture. The first picture shows the beginning step where some black and white was added. That black and white was then morphed into a pattern that imitated what a wooden texture would look like. The end result, along with some other tweaks, is what you see on the right. Here are examples of some of the textures I created during the project. I knew that the normal mapping was important for the floor and wall, so I included those as well for the first two textures you see on the left. In order for the textures I created to be effective, I also needed to make sure my UV mapping skills were on point. Before this project, I've had plenty of experience with creating UVs for simple models. Since you don't need to know too many advanced tricks for cell shading, it's been beneficial in the past to use this kind of texturing style. While I've mapped more advanced models before using Maya, I wasn't the most confident in it during the beginning of this project. Going into the project, I knew I wanted to improve my skills for when I worked on some more complex models. Due to the lack of experience and understanding, I would sometimes take a guess for UV mapping in the past. Out of anything for this project, I wanted to have a better idea of what a UV map would look like for a model before actually getting into the unwrapping process. Just as I did with texturing, I looked up some tutorials online for UV mapping. As I proceeded through the tutorial, I would predict what the outcome would look like for the UV mapping. I would also make sure I understood why each step was executed the way it was, compared to doing anything else. While I was conducting my research, I kept a close eye on what techniques were used for certain shapes. Even with the simpler tutorials, each step was important to read. This is because even if it's something that was relatively simple, it could be something I haven't thought of before or even could be applied to a different model that I make in the future, not regarding even this project possibly. In this tutorial, the model being mapped was extremely simple but had some important in-depth information. Some of the parts of the tutorial even talked about positive alternatives for creating certain parts of the UV and even what they would have done if the object was a different shape. The next few slides show some of the models I have UV mapped and textured. This is a bridge part that was created as a part of a jumping puzzle in our game. This is a sink that was created as an environmental piece for a certain part of the level. The last asset I'll show in this presentation is a locker. The lockers in the level were used as a part of the puzzle in our game. To wrap up this presentation, I'm going to reflect on how I feel I did over the course of this project. Looking back at the progress I made during this project, I feel that I have improved quite a bit with my texturing and UV mapping skills. Although I could have improved further, there's always room for improvement of anything we do as designers, and I will always be looking forward to making my creations better. Overall, I'm very happy with the knowledge and skills I've gained and or improved during this project. If I could go back and do this again, I would definitely have established a texturing style with my partner at the beginning of the project rather than a little further in. One thing I'm definitely proud of in this project are my UV mapping skills. I feel I've improved a lot and I am eager to keep improving those skills. From this project, I would say that there are three things I learned the most. One is to plan further ahead for researching. Although I did plan for the researching during this project, I definitely underestimated the time it would take for researching and learning the new skills. Secondly, I learned a lot about UV mapping and how to make my UV maps more efficient. Lastly, I learned how to create more diverse textures and learned some different techniques for creating those textures. Well, that concludes my discipline review. I want to thank you for watching, and I look forward to hear your feedback.